Welcome back to the Makers of MidCity Podcast. I'm your host, Clark Dunn.
My name is Lindsay Patillo-Keen. I'm the Executive Director of MidCity District.
Yeah, and today we have the opportunity to have Dennis Madsen, the Manager of Urban and Long-Range Planning for the City of Huntsville. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me back. I'm glad I didn't mess it up the first time so bad that you were willing to bring me back.
I'm excited. I had you on my podcast a couple years ago, and it was a lot of fun to kind of learn a little bit about it. But the city has changed a lot. MidCity that we're sitting in right now has changed a lot too.
Yes.
For those that maybe don't know really what being a manager of urban and long-range planning means, give us a little bit of a kind of a high level of the work you do and kind of your journey to get to that position in the city.
So I'm with basically in the Department of Urban and Economic Development, which looks at growth in the city. And our planning department really operates in two halves. We have one half that deals with a lot of the day-to-day, platting subdivisions and dealing with rezoning and things like that. The other half of the floor, my half of the floor, really looks at trying to map out what's the city going to look like in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years and beyond, and how do we make sure we're prepared for that? What sort of infrastructure investments do we need to make? How do we need to change or update development patterns? How do we need to make sure that we stay affordable as a city in terms of housing? How do all those things need to work together? So our department is really charged with kind of looking over the horizon, trying to see how the city may change, what forces may come to bear on the city in the coming years, and how can we make sure we're prepared for it? I think you deal better with growth when you're at least anticipating it to some extent.
Yeah. And so you've been with the city for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about maybe some of your early conversations or the knowledge you had early on when MidCity was first getting started.
Oh, yeah.
And kind of your role kind of in that early on. And then, because a lot of the planning is long term.
Yeah.
So those projects you were probably working on kind of in that planning process, those first few years, we might have just seen in the last year or two come to all together.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that and kind of your first sort of understanding of what's happening here at MidCity.
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion because this happened. When did we start? When did you guys start? Like 10 years? 17?
Yeah.
So we're closing on a 10-year anniversary. But what was interesting was a group of us, probably back in 15 or 16, had gone over to the American Planning Association's national conference in Atlanta. And every year there's kind of a theme or there's sort of a popular topic. And that year it happened to be the redevelopment of regional malls. Huntsville was not the only one to be dealing with the idea that there were these enormous regional malls. Everyone knows them. They've got food courts, featured in Stranger Things, that kind of thing. I grew up in a regional mall basically. But cities were struggling with the fact that these were becoming rapidly outdated models. We had, of course, overbuilt them in a lot of places, and we were starting to see a contraction. We were starting to see changes in buying habits and purchasing habits that were impacting the performance of malls. And there was this long discussion, multiple sessions about, okay, what do you do? These are such big buildings. They're really difficult to redevelop as buildings themselves. And there were plenty of case studies about, well, you can shift some of the big box to residential, or you turn it into a municipal, a government center, all things that were kind of a little, not always analog to Huntsville. But what really came out of the discussion was there are really two approaches. One, you could let that mall crater, all right? You can just let it kind of finally fall into its death throes, and then a municipality or someone else can sweep in and scoop it up for pennies on the dollar. The challenge with that is when you do that, malls don't operate in a vacuum. They have an impact beyond their own borders. So if you let the mall fall apart, a lot of times what can happen is a lot of the land around it starts to lose performance. You see increases in public safety service calls. You see the reduction in property values in properties that are adjacent to the mall. So we didn't want that to happen. So the other option that a lot of folks were talking about was go in and be a partner early, right? Find someone to help you take this down because it's a big project. Yeah. And in some cases, you can do some adaptive reuse of parts of it. In some cases, you want to clear the site. But for us, it was really about, okay, how do we find a partner who can share a vision for what this should be in its next generation, and then lay out that vision? And we were lucky enough to find RCP, who was, kind of on the same page. They had kind of a history of doing kind of progressive, forward-thinking urban design and really looking at how development can create more, not just retail spaces, but unique spaces, places that people want to come to, experience, and then come back to. And that was probably the most important part, because when we came back, we said, all right, here's our strategy. We're going to figure out, talk about how, how we can look at this mall in terms of redevelopment, and then find ourselves a partner to engage in it.
Yeah, and from Lindsay, talk about your perspective as, starting off on that ground level, working with the City of Huntsville, trying to figure out kind of what this looks like for the grand scheme of things, because the area even adjacent to MidCity is growing at the same rate that MidCity is growing. How has that continual conversation had to happen between RCP and the City of Huntsville to ensure that, like, at different stages of MidCity, that everything is still on track to kind of do what the initial vision was, but then also if the vision has changed because of just where we are as a city, that we're able to adapt and be ready to support whatever might come your way?
I think it's continual communication with the city to make sure we are on every map that is a part of bike paths, public transport, all of that. And I know that we already are, but, being involved in those conversations, making sure that we're filling the city and you guys and Dennis's group with entry points, ideal entry points, new developments that are coming in, new ideas that are coming into MidCity so when we are finalizing how people get here from an alternative to vehicles, that it's a successful entry point, that it works with what is existing, what Dennis's department is working on. So it's just ongoing communication. I think if we had a bike path here day one, it would not have been used. So we're lucky in that as MidCity is growing, so is the city's infrastructure with Dennis's department, that we're both kind of facilitating each other's movement together, and growth together. So it's been really important that we were just talking about a sidewalk project that we've been brainstorming for a while, and that it's happening. It's just getting it done and in a timely manner, and so it's lucky that we've been building it as the city's infrastructure has been moving towards this direction.
It's a great point, because you're right. Things do change over time. These are not quick build outs. If you're taking down a multi-acre site, you think of even another development similar to MidCity, say Providence down the road. That's been in development for 20 years, 2 decades when you really think about it. These are long projects. They take a long time to get out of the ground. If you want them done right, it takes some forethought, but it's important to recognize, market will change or a new development will come online that may impact or tweak that site plan. So we have to be talking constantly about, if you have to change a block or they have to change a frontage, what does that mean for us and how can we accommodate that? So, we've been talking about this sidewalk connection as RCP's development works its way in that direction. Now that gives us more impetus to say, all right, if you're going to start building in this area, let's go ahead and put that piece on the ground, and let's coordinate what we're doing with what you're doing. Another great example is that we're talking a little bit earlier about the Monrovia improvements, the old Monrovia improvements, recognizing this is a walkable district, but it's got a few kind of hard, say less walkable edges around it. There are things that the city can do in concert with RCP to kind of reduce those barriers or soften those barriers. So if you've got development on one side of Old Monrovia, allow those two things to connect a little bit more comfortably. Another great example that you guys have been great partners on early on is the TOD study that we're doing, which is as the city grows, we really want to expand our transit options. And one of the best ways to do that, and I think we talked about this a few years ago when you and I first spoke about bus rapid transit, which we think is kind of the next level of transit for the area. As you're developing studies for bus rapid transit, you also at the same time want to talk about how do we develop more density or more activity to support that transit. So instead of chicken or egg, you're doing kind of chicken and egg at the same time, talking about transit and transit supportive development at the same time. A lot of that, MidCity is a great kind of classic example of transit-oriented development. It's got a lot of activity. It's got a lot of diverse activity around it. But if we're doing something like that on the university, we want to work with Lindsay's team at looking at how can we make sure that they're able to engage that and take advantage of it. So it's good for them because they get enhanced transit service. It's good for us because we get more ridership for that transit service. So it's constant discussion between us and our development partners.
Yeah, I think it's interesting the point that Lindsay made about, thinking about being a walkable district and biking had a timing that needed to happen. The district had to be at a point in time for that to be as successful as it could be. And I think it's the interesting, as we mentioned a lot of the podcast, it's that idea that people can live, work, and play in MidCity. At this point, those are needed to support that. But I also think that messaging is also something that people can see across all of Huntsville, where there are these areas and pockets and the infrastructure that y'all are putting together for the city to make it a more walkable city, and having these pockets and these communities that you can traverse from one end to the other and not really ever, be worried about crossing the street or whatever it might be. How much of the cities outside of MidCity, looking at just Huntsville in general, how much of kind of as things are changing in that level, is that conversation kind of back and forth of like, oh, this works really well, this didn't really work the way we thought it would, maybe we should go in this direction, and kind of vice versa, as you're looking at kind of not only making MidCity its place in this community, but also making Huntsville on the broader sense kind of that same mantra.
Yeah, it's nice that Lindsay's allowed us to kind of use her work as a guinea pig, right? We get to say, is this working? What do we like about this? What didn't fly? But you're right. So we use the term, and it's a wonky planning term, the polycentric city. The idea that you have multiple cores that are all kind of interrelated and interacting with each other. Some other cities that do it well, my own stomping grounds of Atlanta, you didn't just have downtown and midtown, but you had Castleberry Hill and Old Fourth Ward and East Atlanta Village and Virginia Highlands, all these kind of unique neighborhoods and spaces that worked with each other. Chattanooga was a great city, kind of comparable to us, that did the same thing as well. They focused very much on their downtown, but they also had all these other little districts around it. They had North Shore and South Side and UTC and St. Elmo that all had their own unique identity, but they were all kind of connected, and they had relationships that made the city as a whole much more livable and much more attractive. And they all looked at that, mixed use model, walkable model. But as you're doing those kind of centers, the other thing you need to talk about is that connective tissue. You want this to be walkable and bikeable here, but you also want folks, if they're walking, biking, or taking transit, to be able to go from one place to another. So now it's that look, to the sidewalk discussion, or say the Singing River Trail discussion, creating this greenway spine, or what we're doing in North Huntsville with the North Huntsville Greenway and creating this connection eventually from Alabama A&M all the way down to Ditto Landing. What do the links look like among those things? Because I think the more we can create those links, now the more folks you're drawing into these centers, and those centers perform better. You get these much more livable communities, plural, throughout the city.
Yeah, and from your as the work that you're doing, I mean, it's constantly evolving. We've mentioned that multiple times throughout the podcast. There's always changing. You're always having to kind of pivot a little bit, and that's okay.
Yeah.
How much of it is from the city's perspective? Are you looking at other cities around us in the region and seeing what they do that works well? Obviously, every market's a little different, and so you can't take it hey, it worked well for them, it's going to work well for us. But there is sort of that correlation of maybe this is the direction people are wanting to see something like this be done.
Yeah.
How much of that is in the work that you do on a daily basis for the city of Huntsville?
Yeah, well, a ton of it, and it's nice that we've got partners like Lindsay as well who would take some of that vision. A lot of times they're bringing it to us, or we're kind of working on it. A great example is the music. The music office that we have, and that discussion around expanding the footprint of our music economy. And this is one of the kind of important parts of that, not just for the Orion, but a lot of the supporting uses around the Orion. That's a lesson learned from Nashville, right? Nashville created, really anchored itself in that music brand. We're never going to be Nashville. We're never going to be Austin, but we can have a pretty solid music identity. We can have it be a part of our culture. We can have it be a part of our economy. So that's a lesson I am more than happy to steal good ideas from other cities. Call it flattery, call it whatever you want. But Chattanooga, that great job that they did with developing their different neighborhoods and connecting their neighborhoods. Birmingham with the infrastructure that they implemented when they did the kind of the highway upgrades and improvements. Kind of sticking to their guns and saying we really want the areas underneath those overpasses to be occupiable, to contribute to the quality of community. So they got these great kind of underlying spaces in Birmingham. Would love to do something like that here, kind of on our northern edge of downtown, and kind of examine what we might do underneath that. So, and then of course one of the biggest things we're trying to learn from is Atlanta's Beltline, which is a phenomenal project, both from the public and private sector, in terms of taking something that's within your existing DNA, in their case, old rail lines, in our case, kind of old floodways and abandoned rail lines, and using them for public amenities, in this case, greenways, but also for economic development. So we do a lot. It's, my job as a good bit of theft, right? Looking around at what other cities are doing. The nice thing is, too, we have some great partners who have very similar vision. We also have a lot of folks in this city who aren't from here or who have lived a good bit of time someplace else. And it just gives them kind of a sense of optimism because they're like, well, I lived in X city and I saw they did this great kind of boulevard and I think we could do that here. Or, I lived in Atlanta and I saw what they did with the Beltline. We could totally do that here. So it makes our jobs a little bit easier because that vision's, it's not that hard to sell because people have seen things like that. People have seen vision like that and quality of life investments like that done other places. And they say, why not Huntsville?
Yeah. And I think that idea of, there's one of my favorite books for like, I guess kind of that artist sort of mentality is steal like an artist. And the idea that like, and you're not necessarily trying to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
The wheel's been invented. It's just trying to figure out the way that it works best for you.
Great.
And so I think that is such a unique thing. And I think, from MidCity's perspective, Lindsay, y'all always look at the data of people visiting the district outside of the city of Huntsville.
That's right.
How much of that conversation, too, is as you see maybe different regions of the United States have a higher input of people coming here for events and kind of seeing maybe why, like, is there a reason why they're like choosing to come here? Did they do something really cool in their area that we could do here too? Because I know RCP is big into kind of looking broadly at, not only what's happening in the state, but what's happening in the country as a whole when it's looking at the development of MidCity.
Well, Huntsville's always been the capital of North Alabama. It's been our role to entertain Southern Tennessee and Northern Alabama. So we still hold that true because of the size of the city and because of the amenities here. And me, born and raised in Huntsville, you too, Clark, we, being able to be a tourist in my own hometown that I've been in for 40 years, there's something really to be said about that I don't feel the need to escape. I feel like I'm trying to decide what to do in my own hometown. So, and with every single block that we open here at MidCity, it's drawing a whole different type of consumer and traveler, visitor, local. With the Orion opening, that opened a whole nother type of visitor to MidCity. With Trader Joe's opening, with High Point Climbing, Dave & Buster's, when we finally had residential on site, that's a whole different way of thinking about this space. I'll never forget when the first resident moved in, that someone loves this place enough to call it home. And then you realize how important the things are that you're doing here, that people can enjoy that walkability and feel great about parking their car and just strolling with their dog, heading to the farmer's market. So we're learning as each block is built, and incorporating that so where we can connect to the rest of the city, where we can have those local tourists, where people, if they want to not just be fitness focused, but want to also be active and live that kind of European lifestyle where it doesn't have to be go to the gym to be healthy. Sometimes you just want to get somewhere, and that is your activity for the day. And so I love that concept of this kind of philosophy behind getting here, and also the commute here adding to the experience as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I think as being a local and being from here, you're getting to this point that my wife and I have the conversations of, we're going to this show this weekend. There's so much that's happened in MidCity. Maybe we should just stay there for the weekend. And like that is just, first off, we live here. Why would we want to But it is just so, to be a part of it and kind of seeing it grow and kind of seeing what it was as a mall and then what it is today and what it's going to be, and not even seeing, we're 40% of the way through build out of this amazing district. Exactly. And there's so much left. There's so much amazing conversations that are being had behind the scenes to make this into something that is just, I mean, it's going to have that evergreen effect. It's going to be around. It's going to kind of have this impact, and generation over generation will kind of be a part of this. Dennis, talk a little bit as we kind of wrap up the conversation about some of the projects as we sit end of September here in 2025, some of the projects that you're working on specifically in the city that maybe people can see kind of come to completion maybe this year or in the next maybe 18 months.
Yeah, I think the theme right now is really connectivity. As we're creating more of these districts, a lot of it is about the links, and I think some of our most exciting projects are We call it the PARC, the Pedestrian Access and Revitalization Corridor. But most folks know it anecdotally as the SkyBridge. That should get going probably within the next 6 months. And that is this great kind of bike ped connection between the Low Mill and Mill Creek area and downtown.
Cool.
But that will really form kind of a hub for greenway work going both south, working our way south down to Ditto Landing. We've got a few little pieces to kind of fill in down in South Huntsville. They'll eventually have kind of sort of like a 13 to 15 mile loop from Ditto Landing up to the New Grissom, out Weatherly to Aldrich Creek and back down. So you've got this great greenway loop there, but we want to link that farther north through John Hunt Park, Bren Springs, Low Mill. Eventually it connects to the park. The park goes across the Parkway and then connects to the depot, which we're doing a new master plan for the depot grounds, and then connects to the new greenway that links up into links all the way up to A&M. So the Meek Greenway is the northernmost part. That should start construction pretty soon if it hasn't already. And then North Huntsville Greenway, which connects Park to the Meek, will build out soon after that. So that's going to create this great kind of north-south spine for greenways. We've got another one that is, personally of interest to me because I live up on Montesano, but we've got the Tollgate Greenway, which will be a finished path from the Land Trust parking lot on Bankhead up to kind of that first hairpin. So most folks love to take that old Bankhead route that takes you up to the overlook in the park. Really, really comfortable walk, really pleasant, nice way to get a little bit of exercise. This will help get you from that all the way down to that parking lot. So that's kind of extending that network. I think we're already looking at, all right, what would the next pieces be to kind of get you into downtown or get you onto Pratt.
It's incredible.
So a lot of what we're doing is really about connectivity. And that I think is exciting because, we are spending a lot of money on making sure our roads work, probably $500 million over the course of a decade, and new projects and widening projects. This is just another layer kind of on top to make sure that you've got a sustainable transportation network. We talked about it last time that the way to really make sure your transportation network functions into the future is to diversify it, right? You can diversify the routes and diversify the modes, right? If you give people a lot of different ways to navigate their city, they can choose the way that's right for them.
Yeah, and I think you're already starting to see that a lot happen in these different pockets. Like we talk about like the downtown pocket. I mean, you get communities. My wife and I used to live downtown, like where the weekends we don't even get the car out of the driveway. It is just all walking. It is just seeing what's happening. And I think that's going to become easier and easier no matter what part of Huntsville you live in, which I think it's just incredible to think about because growing up, I could not imagine that. But it's awesome to see. We'll be sure to have links and everything in the episode notes to some of these projects that Dennis talked about. So you can see some of the press releases for the SkyBridge, the Old Monrovia expansion, all of the other stuff we talked about. You can find links there. But I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. I think we'll definitely probably have to have you back on the podcast in a couple of years because MidCity is going to change, Huntsville's going to change, and there'll be new conversations to be had. But I appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thanks for having me. Sure, absolutely.